Welcome in, everybody, to the best in true crime podcasting. This is True Crime Tuesday. I'm Tim Dennis. We have a very good show in store for you today. I'm going to preface this show with a little something that happened in my week. I had a correspondence from a listener and a good friend who was talking to me about a show that we had done last week, and it kind of got my radar up a little bit, and I'm going to tie that correspondence into today's show. I'm not going to mention the name of the guest, but he said, this guest kind of reminded me of something. It was his enthusiasm, and I'm paraphrasing here, that reminded me of Jonestown and Jim Jones, and he was a little Jonesy. And I thought, no, you didn't quite get the idea here. That's not how he was. He was enthusiastic about his topic, but he was not cult-like. And I think we mistake sometimes the difference between cult-like behavior and what an actual cult is, and who runs a cult, and the narcissism behind cult leaders, and someone who is enthusiastic behind their cause and what they do with that cause. So we're going to kind of separate those things, and we're going to actually talk to somebody who was in a cult, got away from a cult, and is now sharing their story in order to bring clarity out of the fog of complexities involved in today's mad, chaotic world. Our guest today is Radhia Gleis. Her new book is The Followers, Holy Hell and the Disciples of Narcissistic Leaders, How My Years in a Notorious Cult Parallel Today's Cultural Mania. Radhia Gleis has been interviewed by many, many different prestigious people and media organizations, including Robert Mangio, Pittsburgh News, KDKA Radio or News Radio, Mark Dolan, Great Britain News, Hannah Books, Paul Kretschmer. I could go on and on. There's a lot of names here, and a lot of names much better and bigger than I. Lots of great names here. Gliese is also featured on Participate On or Beyond the Buddha field by journalist Bruce Denhill in South Africa, interviewed by Samantha Bartlett, Daily Star Canada, Dorothea Jacobs, Sun UK, Austin Woman Magazine, UK's Global Woman Magazine, 360 Magazine. Also a guest post, How to Recognize a Narcissist on Ms. Career Girl, published feature article Insider Magazine, reviewed by Inger McPhail, Rogers Review, Senora Scott, Concho Valley News, reviewed by Stacy Hearn, AuthorsReading.com, a 4-star rating on Goodreads.com with this book. She was featured in the internationally viewed movie Holy Hell, which was broadcast on CNN and was named one of Sundance Film Festival's and Netflix top 10 documentaries. It can now be viewed on Amazon Prime. So let's go now to our guest here on True Crime Tuesday for this episode. And I'm excited to talk to her, Radhia Gleis. Good morning, Radhia.
Hey,
how are you?
Good morning. Nice to be here.
It's my pleasure to have you here. And like I said, I think, and let's start off before we get your story and get into your story first. Let's talk a little bit about the difference between the understanding. And I think a lot of people have said, well, Roddy, I've spent 10 to 20 hours watching documentaries on Jonestown. I think I know what a cult is, and I think I know what a cult leader is. The difference between somebody who thinks they know what a cult is and what a cult actually is. What is it that people think they have that grasp, and what's totally different? Why is it that people think they know yet they don't?
Well, it's funny, Tim. My book is in 3 sections, and the first section is about my life and how I got there. The second section is the 20 some odd years being there, and the third section is reflections, right? Mm-hmm. And in the first chapter of the third section, it's entitled, "What is a Cult? It's Complicated." And, this word, this 4-letter word, CULT, is very nebulous and we like to use it to be enticing, to be salacious. There's always some, thanks to Jim Jones and Charlie Manson and those kinds of people, they've given cult a bad name, really. And so people are afraid of really looking, not only asking themselves, I might be involved in a cult. And they're afraid because of that, because of the idea of what that means. When you think of cult, you think of two main words that go along with it: brainwashed and drinking the Kool-Aid. Those are typically what people say when they want to insult you.
Right.
And so first of all, let's clarify the word brainwash. The literal word, the actual dictionary definition of brainwash is that you are radicalized either by imprisonment or torture. Okay, so now you can exclude a whole bunch of people in that category. There is a difference between being brainwashed and groupthink, but they overlap a bit. But there is indoctrination. So if you want to broaden the phrase brainwash, in a way, we're all indoctrinated from the time we are born. We come out of the womb, they slap a bracelet on you that identifies you: male, female, white, black, Asian, American, Texan, as I am in Texas right now, or wherever, and they just start putting down on your ID from the moment you come out of the womb who you are and what you are. And that is a form of indoctrination. And then religion, politics, ideologies, and what have you start to get thrown on you from a very, very early age. So let's start from there. Start from what you are looking for. Most people are looking to belong. They're looking for their tribe. And so this is where it starts. Now, I talk in my book about the dangers of narcissistic leaders.
Yep.
So the articles that you were mentioning in my bio, those articles I wrote. So I was asked to write them. What is one is how to recognize a narcissist. The other one is the dangers of groupthink.
Okay.
And what have you. And so as we start to develop our ideas, our ideologies, our identities, etc., we look for a home. And this is where narcissistic leaders, and usually a leader of a cult, has narcissistic tendencies. Now, you can have a cult that is derived from an ideology, but usually it starts with a leader. And usually that leader has narcissistic tendencies. So people get confused about that word too. We like to use that now. That's being used. That's being bantered around. There's a difference. Everybody's got a little narcissism in them, especially people who are in the public. If you've got a radio show or a podcast or a TV show, or you're a performer in some way or another, and you have at least the confidence to put yourself out there.
Sure.
It takes a little bit of healthy narcissism, to feel that you've got something to say, right?
Right.
There's a very big difference between that and you've got entertainers, politicians, on and on, that can have narcissistic tendencies to have enough, self-confidence to do that. There's a difference between that and a pathology or pathological or what we call malignant narcissists. And malignant narcissist is not a character flaw. It's a mental disorder. So, I'm a researcher. That's what I do. Professionally, I'm a biochemical analyst, and I do a lot of research. And then my job is to interpret that research and put it in layman terms so that everybody understands, what I'm doing. And that's kind of what I did in this book. So the book has a lot of research in it, but I wanted to make it palatable. So the only way I could really make it palatable, and that's kind of the way I teach too, is put it in story, put it in story form, something that everyone can relate to one way or the other. And also to put some humor in there and, things like that, so that I can take you down this road. So the whole second section of my book, I take the Diagnostic Manual of Mental Disorders, and I pretty much take it line by line. And I describe, or I'll take a line out of it, and then I'll describe the leader of my group and other leaders around in our history, in our world, in our society, in our culture. And I'll do sort of a parallel between my life and the leader that I was influenced with the Diagnostic Manual. I'm taking it, verbatim, line by line. And here's where you can recognize these characteristics. So that's kind of, what the birth of this book became.
There's one thing in there too, I guess in the mission of the cult that I know, and I know you'll add this to that a little bit later, and that is the mission. There's the mission that's thrown in there, and it's the divine mission of the cult. There's got to be some divine mission in there. I think we all have a divine mission in our lives. We all have some divine mission that we feel is larger or greater than ourselves. And you may say, well, do we? The average person, do they really have a divine mission? I think we really do. If you look at yourself or look within yourself, a divine mission could be something like, I want to help people do this, or I want to go to the soup kitchen once a week and I want to help the homeless. That's a divine mission. I think no matter how small you may look at it, I think we all have some divine mission. Whether it contains, whether it's a hint of narcissism or whether it's on a grand scale of narcissism and you're feeding ego, I really do think there are varying degrees of narcissism in that divine mission. And that's where narcissism gets tied up in this, and whether you bring people into that divine mission. And I think that's where people start to get cults mixed in with other things, or where they begin the misunderstanding. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think maybe what you remind me of when you're saying that is the Messiah complex,
Yes. Yeah.
You get on some ideology, and then you start to really believe, what you're preaching, to the point that you create an ego around it.
Yeah.
Huge ego. And that's where narcissism really comes in. It's one thing to feel confident about what your beliefs are. And that's kind of an oxymoron right there, and I define that. What is a belief as opposed to a fact, or as opposed to truth? Mm-hmm. Truth is immutable. Facts are mutable. I use the example, it was true that 200 years ago man couldn't fly, but was that true? Or have we not just figured it out at that point? Right. So that's the difference between a mutable fact, or immutable truth, and an immutable fact, So when we talk about belief, belief means you don't know for sure. That's the whole definition of belief. So it's kind of, in my mind, in retrospect, after so many years, it's kind of troublesome that people will kill or die for their belief, something that they actually cannot prove and don't know for sure.
Yeah.
So that's where narcissism starts to, bleed into a pathology. We become a little bit too sure of ourselves. And when we do, we start to believe that this is emphatic, that this is the way all things should be, and this is the way you should be as well. And that's where we start to bleed into kind of a derangement. And people do it all the time, whether it's a small little group like mine, or whether it's a nation. People get really stuck in their ideologies and their beliefs to the point that they will go to war. We're looking at a possible war on the brink right now.
Yeah.
And so thinking my way or the highway is kind of the pathology that a lot of us share, and we don't know it. We don't know it because we're so steeped in our ideology and so steeped in our identity. And you're bringing up
a very good point. And in that point that we're getting to, and we're running smack dab into the middle of, is a lot of people question, and it's not really a hard question to answer. And I'm going to have you answer this question. Why is it that seemingly very intelligent people get caught up into the cult mentality?
It's funny. Everybody says this to me, Tim. It just cracks me up at this point. People, I have several graduate degrees, and when people interview me, invariably a few minutes into the interview, they go, "You're so intelligent, Radhia." Thanks. It's like, I don't know how to take that. Like, what they're really saying is, I expected you to be a moron. I expected you to be some gullible,
right
thing. And that's the point, is that it doesn't have anything to do with intelligence or education. It has to do with human nature. And I often use the example of all of those millionaires and lawyers that were built by Bernie Madoff. Mm-hmm. You think that they were stupid?
No.
It has to do with human nature. And it has to do, and this is where the perfect sort of marriage of a narcissistic sociopath and their followers have a feedback loop. And this is why in the very beginning, when I was writing this book, the original working title was called Duped. Because yes, in my sort of investigation of my whole life, I found out, the guy was a pathological liar. He lied about everything. He was a total con. And the word con, by the way, comes from the word confidence. And so he had a shtick, and he knew how to play it, and he was really good at it, just like Bernie Madoff. Mm-hmm. He knew exactly what we wanted, and whether it was illusionary or whether it wasn't, he gave it to us. And in return, the narcissist needs to feel important. They need adulation. They need control. And so there is a feedback loop. And I decided as I was getting into writing this, wait a minute. Yeah, okay, we were duped. Yes, he conned us. Yes, he did. He used parlor tricks, Tim. I mean, he really did. And I didn't even know this till after I got out.
Yeah.
Remember in the turn of last century, they used to have seances.
Yes.
And a medium would come in.
Yep.
This was happening with somebody was talking about Rockefeller.
Okay.
Rockefeller fell into this.
Yes. Yep.
They came in and they had, the table rising and, lights going on and off. This was all parlor tricks. That's where the word came from, parlor tricks, because it happened in their parlor. Well, this guy that I was following did parlor tricks just like that. I mean, he did all this bullshit, right? So he was a total fraud, total con. And so what happens is that however they do this, however they get you in, and they will do whatever it takes to fulfill your desire, whatever that may be. I mean, the poor people in the turn of the century that were falling for this, and they still fall for it today, they want to talk to their dead relatives. And they have so much desire to believe that that's possible that the con can pretty much fulfill that for them. And so this is where the terminology cognitive dissonance comes in. This is where we stop using our rational mind and start, instead of listening to our instincts, we start listening to what we want to hear and what we want to see. And that is a very, very dangerous scenario. And usually the leader, the narcissist becomes the malignant narcissist becomes very skilled. Mm-hmm. They're like chameleons. They'll be whatever you want them to be. And they will figure out what you want them to be, whether it's based on fear, whether it's based on desire, whether it's based on whatever. They'll figure it out, and they'll figure out a way of getting it or giving it to you in order for them to gain power or control over you for whatever they want. And in most cases, narcissists need to have adulation. They need to be looked upon as demigods. And with that, that's where it becomes a feedback loop. Because with us, or what I observed was I loved Jaime. I loved him. Everybody did. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like he was some, people say, they use the term, how did you escape the cult? And that's such a dramatic word. It makes it sound like we were tied in a dungeon somewhere. I didn't escape. I left. All right. So what was it? Now, there is a mental or emotional prison that you get into, but it's not like it's not like he's some evil kind of Svengali, who's got this weird power over these gullible, stupid people. Mm-hmm. I loved him. He did not love us, because a narcissist doesn't love anyone but themselves. So I didn't, but you don't know that because they're really good. They're like chameleons. Like I said, they're chameleons. So they'll learn that if it's love you want, love they'll give you. With me, you had mentioned Holy Hell, the documentary. Right. And I was in Holy Hell. I was interviewed in that movie. And if you haven't seen it, it's a really good film. It's on Amazon. And it's 30 years of archival footage. But it's, the filmmaker, Will Allen, I think he did a beautiful job. He really did. But he had 100 minutes to tell a 30-year story. Wow. So and he had 45 hours of footage that he had to edit down into 100 minutes. Yikes. So you're moving rather rapidly through that story arc that he's developing. Mm-hmm. And so typically I got people, I did a lot of Q&As at Sundance and all over wherever it was being premiered. And some people really got it. And they said, I get it. I would have joined that group, And other people said, well, I'd never be that stupid, Well, okay. So you have to think of it like a frog in warm water. Nobody wakes up one day and says, I think I'm going to join a cult. That just sounds like a real good thing, especially that four-letter word, cult, right? Yeah. Everybody avoids that like the plague. So it's not like they go join a cult. They don't know they're in one, right? And very often they don't for years. And you can tell them, you can do whatever to try and warn them. And if they're getting what they think they want, they will deny that four-letter word like up one side and down the other. We did for 20 some odd years. After a while, I mean, it took a long time, but after a while we were going, is this a cult? We would kind of joke amongst each other, and Philippe in the movies used to say this. He goes, well, if it's a cult, at least it's a good one, and we would laugh about that. Right. And I didn't know until after the movie came out and I started doing research on this book. I did not know how, one, manipulated I was, and how what I was doing was not right. I didn't know it was not right. I didn't know what he was doing was not right. Because like I said, I loved him. We were enjoying ourselves for the most part. None of us, or very few of us, knew what was going on behind closed doors. So, in the movie Holy Hell, it's the story, and he was he was a homosexual.
Let's jump into that in just a moment here. We're going to go to break here in just a moment here, Radhia.
Okay.
I do want to ask you, you said that people kind of challenge you to a point when they say, well, I would never fall into the hands of a cult. I would never. I'm smarter than that. We all have egos. We all have feelings. We all have a part of us that wants to kind of fight back when somebody challenges us.
Absolutely.
What is your response when you hear that over and over and over again?
Well, and you started this whole conversation, Tim, with the word cult. And you started with the example that we talked about, Jim Jones, Charlie Manson and whatever. So there is a terror behind that word. Nobody wants to ever admit that they would fall for that. Except, isn't it interesting that cults, not only in movies, series, television series, books, etc., they're big sellers.
Yeah.
So isn't it interesting that people they'll never say I'd never fall for that, but they sure are interested in it.
Yes, they are.
So I describe in my book that a cult, or the story of a cult, is like a terrarium is made to be viewed, and you want to view it from the protective glass, and you want to see. We want to watch people get intercelled, get taken up, right? But really, we want to see, would I do that? So we want to watch people go through that. And we love those movies and stories, of all of that, because we're actually asking, would I? And before we go, I do want to mention this because, oh my God, on this subject, have you seen this is a video it's a documentary on Netflix, and it's called The Push. Have you seen that?
I don't believe I've seen The Push. No.
Oh my God. Tim, you've got to, and your listeners have got, or your viewers have got to see this. It's called The Push. And the filmmakers set up a very elaborate scenario, very, very innocent. It was a job review that someone was going to come, and he deliberately, and I'm not giving away anything. He tells you up front what he's trying to do.
Okay.
But he takes a regular old person who's there just on a job interview, and he takes them through a set of scenarios that at the end gets them to push a perfect stranger off a building to their death.
What?
You've got to see it.
Oh my God.
It's a documentary. It's a real thing. And that's my point. You got to see it, because the filmmaker wants you to go step by step, and he's talking to the viewer about telling them what he's doing, right? And so you're going and you go to the next step and you go to the next step and you're asking yourself, yeah, I would do that. Yeah, okay. If you were put in this situation, would you do that? And he walks you through a scenario, and he does it with several people. Now, he's got it all rigged so that the person is harnessed and they're an actor and they don't really do it. But the person who's doing it does not know that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That is a major, not just a psychological experiment, but that's a life-changing thing.
Oh, yeah. So that's what I love about this movie, because when you say, well, people say, I'd never do that. Really? If put in the right situation, it is amazing what we will do. And I say this, and I know that this ruffles a lot of feathers, but we go to war. We're trained, some of us, to slaughter people.
Yeah.
And we're trained to do that. And we are called heroes for doing that.
True. Very true.
So, how far can you be pushed under the right narrative? Oh, it's for God and country, or it's for whatever. We're at war everywhere on this planet right now, doing horrendous things to people because of an ideology. But we're heroes, or we're justified in this scenario, but not in this over here. So when we think, oh, I'd never do that, in the right scenario with the right ideology or the right identity, you'll pretty much do anything,
Wow. Okay, well, let's stop here. Let's take a break. When we come back, let's get Radhia's story. I know we've hinted towards it a couple of times here in this half hour as we've kind of ramped up to talking about her story. And let's get the full story and what exactly happened to Radhia and how she got into this 4-letter word Radhia cult. And and how it happened that she ended up in this cult, along with your family, correct?
Sorry?
Along with your family, you were in this cult?
No.
No. Okay.
Not my physical family. No.
Okay.
On the contrary.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we come back, we'll talk about Radhia, her experience in the cult, how she ended up in it, and how easy it could be for you to end up in this exact same situation. Now, Radhia's got actually an excellent deal for all of our listeners that we're going to unveil right now, and that is you can get a free copy on Kindle of Radhia's book. It's called The Followers, Holy Hell and the Disciples of Narcissistic Leaders, How My Years in a Notorious Cult Parallel Today, or let me try that again. How my years in a notorious cult parallel today's cultural mania. Here's the deal. You can download it for free on Kindle. The only thing you have to do is just review the book. That's it.
That's what I'm looking for.
That's it. That's what Radhia is looking for here, is for you to review the book. So we're going to have a link in the description of this show. Just go to the description of this show, click on that link, read the book, and review it. That's what Radhia is looking for. That's what we're looking for here on True Crime Tuesday. And I'll tell you, folks, I've had the pleasure of looking at this book, of reading this book. It is highly entertaining. It is almost spellbinding. I'll give you that, Radhia. It is a good read, and I want our listeners to go ahead and read this book as well on Kindle and read it for yourself. It's not just your typical book or story about cults. It really does do a deep dive psychologically into cults and narcissistic leaders of cults. So again, when we go to break, click on the description. The link in the description of this program, and download it for free on Kindle, and then just give it a review. That's your price for reading the book. It's real simple. The cheapest price you'll pay for a book all year.
Absolutely. It's a deal.
Absolutely. When we come back here on True Crime Tuesday, we'll talk more to Radhia Gleis about her experiences in her cult. Well, not your cult, Radhia, but in the cult you were in. We'll do that next here on the best in true crime podcasting. This is True Crime Tuesday. Welcome back to the best in true crime podcasting. This is True Crime Tuesday. I'm Tim Dennis. Our guest is the author of The Followers, Holy Hell and the Disciples of Narcissistic Leaders, How My Years in a Notorious Cult Parallel Today's Cultural Mania. And again, if you want a free copy of the book on Kindle, it's real simple. There's a link in the description of this program. You just go to that link, you click on it, and all you have to do is review the book. That's it. And you get a free copy of this amazing book. It's informative, it's entertaining, and best of all, it's free if you just review the book. Radhia Gleis is our guest and the author of this amazing book. And Roddy, I want to thank you first of all for doing that for us. That's quite generous of you. And I'll tell you, I got a chance to read this book, and I was not only quite entertained, I was blown away by the story, which we're going to talk about a little bit about your personal story right now. First of all, why don't you take us to your upbringing first? Let's start with your upbringing, because a lot of people want to know, well, there had to be something from the beginning, Roddy. Of course, there had to be some hitch in the get along. There had to be something with your upbringing that formed you in a different way to get you into a cult. So let's give people a little background about you and tell people exactly how you grew up and what life was like for you before.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Los Angeles. I grew up in technically Brentwood, where O.J. Simpson is from. He was a block away from our house. I grew up in a very affluent background. I was born in the 50s, 60s, 70s. That's when I grew up in Los Angeles. My father was a very prominent attorney. He was a lawyer for all of the Hollywood and Los Angeles elite. My mother was she was a fashion designer. And I use the term entrepreneur class. We were not the super rich. Mm-hmm. We weren't the middle class. We weren't the super rich. We were like the entrepreneur class. My father was the lawyer for the super rich, that kind of thing, Mm-hmm. He was the servant. But we hung out with the super rich. I went to private Catholic school, and we did all of we were members of the country club and the Bay Club and all of that other stuff. So, I grew up in a very affluent background. Now people, when they see that kind of life, they have this idea of the ideal life that everyone is searching for. A lot of people, that's their main motivation. A lot of people, like, the victims of Bernie Madoff, they were looking to embellish that kind of life, that affluence. And as I said in my book, all that glitters is not gold. Mm-hmm. That kind of life on the surface may look just wonderful and what everyone strives for, but there's a price that you pay for that. And for me as a child, the price is, because my parents were not handed that on a silver platter, they had to work for it. Mm-hmm. And so if you ever saw, Tim, did you ever see the series Mad Men?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was my life. That was typical of my parents of that era. They were in that kind of, my mother she was close to Madison Avenue. Mm-hmm. She did a lot. She was a designer. So she was in New York and in Paris and in Asia a lot. And so my parents were sort of MIA. They were very busy with their careers. And especially in those days, people think that it was sort of the Leave It to Beaver life in those days, but it really, really wasn't. There was a lot of struggle. And so, psychologists refer to something called secure attachment. Mm-hmm. And that happens as a child, as an infant, and through your early childhood. And, if I look back at my parents, I know that they loved me, but having children was something you had to do. Mm-hmm. It wasn't something that you particularly wanted to do, but you would be definitely a curiosity to society if you didn't have children.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I was, like part of the furniture. So was my brother. We were there because that's what you did, But that being said, sometimes I refer to myself as a latchkey kid with a governess, It's sort of like, the family unit was not there. I had maids and governesses and things like that. But, and my governess, she was in her 70s when I was born. So I didn't have her for very long anyway.
Oh, wow.
And then you just end up with maids, to take care of you. Mm-hmm. And so it's a kind of a strange dichotomy of what it looks like on the surface, the idyllic, successful 1960s American life. Mm-hmm. But it's not. And in those days, just like in Mad Men, alcohol was like everywhere. Right? Mm-hmm. They just referred to it as cocktail time. Cocktail time, they were all alcoholics, every one of them, and they smoked and drank and, they were bigots and racist. And, it was like, it was Mad Men. That was so beautifully depicted of that era.
Yeah.
And so, it was the Rat Pack. It was, Frank Sinatra and all of those. And as a matter of fact, I knew, my dad was, he was the lawyer for Dean Martin's wife on one of them, and Gregory Peck lived down the street and, that kind of stuff. So it was a very glamorous life on the surface. I was a debutante and, it was a glamorous life. But behind closed doors, it was not. It was lonely. And my father was a bit abusive, more emotionally abusive than physical, although he was somewhat physical abusive. My brother was abusive physically and mentally. And my brother became a drug addict. I tied him off as he shot crystal meth in his arm at age 14.
Oh, my gosh.
So... And what's weird is, and I don't tell the story, in that first section as a woe is me. This mm-hmm. is not a woe is me. Everybody has their life and their stories. And mine, believe it or not, Tim, mine was lightweight compared to some of my friends that had even more traumatic lives behind closed doors than I did. So it's not a tale of woe, and it's not a tale of I'm a victim. But what I was doing is trying to show you the psychology behind why people look for, and obviously what I was looking for was a little bit more wholesome family. Mine was not so much.
Right.
I was looking for that secure attachment. Because I didn't have that kind of security, even though monetarily I had all the security I needed, but I didn't have emotional security.
I'm trying to think of a good way to ask this, Radhia, without seeming materialistic. Because why couldn't you?
She froze up on me. There you are.
Oh, okay. For somebody who doesn't come from a materialistic or monetary background, they could say, well, Radhia, why wouldn't you just buy your way out of an emotional attachment? Why couldn't you just surround yourself with material goods and try to fill the hole that way?
Well, isn't it interesting? Because a lot of people do, don't they? Mm-hmm. A lot of people are willing to sacrifice their soul, as a matter of fact, to see if they can buy their way out. Mm-hmm. So people do. Now, I didn't. I mentioned that I was raised a Catholic. Catholicism has a term called the age of reason, and you reach the age of reason at age 7. And I left Catholicism at the age of reason. It was not reasonable to me. Although I went to Catholic school and I continued on through high school, it just didn't make any sense to me. You can't have an all-loving, all-knowing, omnipotent, omniscient God and then a hell.
Right.
That's like, what? That doesn't make sense. So, you can do all of this unless you fuck up, and then you burn forever.
Mm-hmm.
So even as a 7-year-old, that wasn't logical. It didn't make sense. But the thing that I was enamored by was the saints. And of course, in Catholicism, they're sort of the demigods, they're sort of the Catholic Church's concession to Rome. Okay, we'll have a polytheism, but it'll be demigods. So, they taught a lot about the saints, and even the stories be told of their martyrdom and their whatever. I was enamored with them. I was like, wow. Like no matter what, they're being tortured and they're being martyred, but they still have this sort of, transcendental state that they're in. So from an early age, that's what I wanted. I wanted to be a saint. Not, oh, look at me, aren't I a great and beautiful person? I wanted whatever that transcendental state was. Yeah. I wanted to be able to transcend my pain, my emotional pain. So instead of thinking that I could buy it, and understand, Tim, I only know this in retrospect. I didn't know when I was a child that I had no secure attachment. This was just life.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So I didn't know I needed anything. I thought I had everything, and was shamed that, that wasn't enough. Because I was trained to believe that was all, that was everything. Wealth and success and all of that was everything. Okay, well, if that's it, why aren't I or any of my friends or my family happy? Because they're not. They're all alcoholics and drug addicts and everything else. So how's that working for you,
Right. So
I wanted something that was transcendental. I wanted to experience, I went to Catholic school all the way up in high school, and to the school's credit, by the time I was a freshman, they were giving comparative religions. And I was taking this course. I was 14, and they were talking about, Buddhism and Hinduism and all the isms. And we came across a word in Hindu, nirvana. And I wanted to know what that word meant. And the teacher said, well, there are yogis in India that through a certain meditation practice experience God directly. Next question. And I'm like, wait, what? Like you can do that? And he said, well, apparently. And I'm like, well, first of all, what are you doing here if you know that? And second of all, that was it for me. From the time I was 14, I thought that has to be true. I mean, if God is everything and all things and everywhere, God has to be in me somewhere, and there has to be a way in, right?
Right.
So from the time I was 14, I set out on that journey. And yes, I was in the 60s and 70s in Los Angeles. Yes, there was a lot of drugs, sex, and rock and roll. So yes, there was a lot of psychedelics in my past, and a lot of, things were happening in the culture at the time. Things were being shaken up, and it's shown in Mad Men. It shows the progress of the culture at the time. So civil rights and gay rights and women's rights and all of that were being put on the table. And so our world was being rocked, our Leave It to Beaver world was, being shattered by all of these cultural shifts. And so I was right there in the middle of it, trying to decide, is this life, this affluent, white, wealthy life, because it's so far, and that's, great, but it's so shallow, and I'm not getting any rich depth from it.
Right.
And now I'm seeing my culture starting to question everything. Like, is this rich white life, good for everybody? Not so much. So that's when I started to really question everything, question myself, question my beliefs, my mores, my identities. And so I wanted to find something higher. And a lot of people, they get confused because we had the nickname for our group. We didn't have an official name. So the nickname for it was the Buddha Field.
Okay.
And some people, somebody just wrote an article about me and this whole thing, and I had to correct them. They said we worshipped Buddha. No, we didn't worship Buddha. We wanted to be the Buddha. Mm. That's what we were striving to be. Okay. We were striving to have that transcendental experience, which is what is used in Indian culture. And so we didn't want to worship anyone. We didn't want to worship a God or a Jesus or a Buddha or a Krishna. We wanted to become what they were, right? So that was the goal. And it was a lofty goal.
Yeah.
And so we met a guy, and I tell the story of how that process happened. But we met a guy who said, yeah, I can take you there, Bernie Madoff. Yeah, I can get you where you want to go. I have those techniques. And that's how it happened, Tim. It's a long story, but yeah, that's how it happened. And did he have those techniques? Yes. And in the beginning, that's what they were all about, is the techniques. It had nothing to do with him. It was, he stole those techniques from Maharaji. Mm-hmm. He was never, he would tell the tale of how he and his relationship with his guru. He never had a guru. He was a liar from the start, right? He was never a disciple of anybody, right? He stole those. He conned a premi. He conned a guy who was a disciple of Maharaji's, conned him out of the techniques, and then decided to start his own gig, right? And we didn't know that. We didn't know that for like 20 years. We didn't know that because He was good at what he did. He was an actor, a failed actor, by the way. He was from Venezuela. He came to Hollywood to become an actor. He was so bad at it, which it shows some of his films in Holy Hell. Oh my God. He was so bad. But what he was good at was he was a porn star. Oh. And that's where he became his Hollywood fame. He was a porn star, right? But he had these techniques, and so he started teaching us in the very, very beginning. This was our birthright, and this has nothing to do with him, and it's all about you and the meditation of the knowing, and I'm going to teach you how to do it and how to practice it and whatever. And of course, to some of us, it was very profound experience, and to some, nobody got anything. But if you didn't get anything, he'd blame you. Well, that's because you're not devoted enough. That's because you're not surrendered enough. That's because you're in your ego, So I'm going to teach you how to get out of your ego, right? By serving me. Mm. So yeah, it was a mutual arrangement. And your goal was for God realization. And then after a while, when this guru gig started to take off, he used to say, connect to God's love. And after a while, he changed the narrative to connect to my love. And I was like, I was an elder and there were others that were initiates. And I was like, wait a minute. When did this message change? And I confronted him on it, and he would say, well, Radhia, he had this weird little accent. He would say, well, some people, not you, because he knew how to play me, mm-hmm. Not you, but some people need a living master, like a Jesus or a Buddha that you can follow. I am just being that for them, right? So that's how it happened. And so his narcissism started to grow. And as people started to treat him like a Jesus or a Buddha or whatever, I mean, come on, Jesus started with disciples. Nobody knew, or whatever people think he was back then. He was a guy, and he was a guy that some people loved and beloved and followed, and other people didn't like him, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, what you see, or what we understood as this master-disciple relationship, which we were reading a lot of books about Eastern culture, and we were studying Yogananda and Ramana Maharshi and Ananda Ma and all of these great Indian saints and, leaders. And we wanted to emulate that in the West. So we wanted our own sort of contemporary ashram. And that's how we built it. So it started out when I first met Jaime, there were 4 of us. And then when he moved to LA, then there was about 15, and then there were 30, and then there was 60, and it worked like that. And we weren't recruiting people, we didn't think of it like that.
Right.
We were having such a good time. We were living, and it shows, you'll see real archival footage of our life in the beginning. And we're living this idyllic life. I mean, really beautiful life. Mm-hmm. And we were our community was very special. I mean, they really were. And we loved each other, and we were doing things that the average person was never doing, as far as in-depth. We would have, every night we were together, every day. We had our own jobs and our own work and life, mm-hmm. but every night we would come together for one function or another. And in those functions, he was really intense. And so I sort of refer to us as the Navy SEALs of spirituality. He put us through a lot of exercises to transcend our egos, right? Okay. So we explored that, and we explored our identities, and we explored our egos. Well, isn't that handy for a narcissist? Because anytime you question him, he'd just say you're in your ego, and your goal was to drop the ego. Well, that's nice. So, suck my dick, otherwise you're in your ego. Okay, so that kind of became handy for him. Yeah. And so that's how it came. But like I said, in the movie Holy Hell, he was homosexual, so he was a sexual predator. Mm-hmm. So for the women, we didn't have that experience. He was not a predator towards the women. Okay. And if you weren't good looking, and if you weren't his type, he would never try and transcend you to a higher level that those special guys had, the divine rod, Okay. And he would literally say, "This is how my master taught me how to surrender," Okay. Yeah. So, and that's complicated, which I talk about sexuality, and I talk about, I make comparisons, Tim, all through the book. Okay. And I make comparisons of political leaders, mm-hmm. as well as spiritual leaders, all through history and what we're dealing with right now. And I really want to drive this home, because people will not. I talk about the President of the United States. You can't talk about a President of the United States without looking political. And my sarcasm is pretty bad, I admit. Mm-hmm. However, it's not about politics. It's not about religion. Mm-hmm. It's about pathology. And that's what I'm driving home. This is about the follower and the leader and the pathology of a narcissist, and how they can get you into a web where you'll pretty much do anything for them. And how does that work? And the dynamics between the leader and the follower, the feedback loop that can turn into some pretty weird shit, Mm-hmm. And so when Will is telling his story in the film, Tim, I didn't see that until I'm sitting in an audience of hundreds of people at Sundance Film Festival. I did not know that. That was 10 years after I left the Buddha field, and I did not know the details of my brothers and what happened behind closed doors.
Wow.
And that was 10 years after I left. So we're talking 30 years of a whole life that I didn't know what was going on. And I'm not stupid, right? But like I said, when, typical narcissists, when they're leaders, they'll create tiers of leadership, right? So he had his immediate entourage. Think of that. So there's him at the top, and then that immediate entourage. Those are the guys that he's, having sex with behind closed doors that aren't telling anybody. Those are the guys that are with him, living with him, that are with him 24/7. That's his cabinet.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
And then the second tier is the elders. Those are the initiates, like myself. Okay. So there were only 40 initiates out of 150. So he stopped initiating people once his guru gig took off. Then it was no longer about the meditation practice. It was about him, right?
Right.
So the initiates were that second tier. And he builds, like all leaders, they will build their tier and tap into their own narcissism, their own exceptionalism, right? So if you're living with the guy and you're having a sexual relationship with him, you are the prince, and then that's his cabinet. But then we're like the Senate, and we have this sort of different position, but it's still high. We're still highly revered in the organization. So then you had your aspirants, those who were aspiring to the knowing, and then you had your newbies. So there's these tiers that are developed in any kind of relationship, in any kind of culture. And it's a relationship. It could be with your spouse. It could be with your boss. It could be in a corporation, a religion. All of these tiers are built. And usually the top guy, it's usually a he, and he usually knows exactly what he's doing. And he's creating this structure.
So it sounds like the top guy builds his own feedback loop because he wants to keep feeding the narcissistic ego and id. But in that, if things start to fall apart, if you get a little too big for your britches, so to speak, and this insulary Senate that you've built, it starts to fall apart and they start to see you for who you are. How does at that point the leader start to cover up? Or at that point, does everything come crashing down?
Oh, he makes sure that the narrative stays solid. And so if you see, that's the thing. And you can always be sure, there's two kinds of teaching: Socratic teaching and non-Socratic teaching. So Socratic teaching is you put your ideas out on the table, we talk about them, we argue them, we defend them, we walk away with our own conclusion. Non-Socratic is indoctrination. This is the rules, this is the story, you do not deviate from it, or you will be ostracized, or you will be publicly demonized. Okay. So he kept a very tight ship. And you can always tell when when you can't question an ideology, run like hell. Because that is where it becomes a trap and it starts taking your free thinking away. When you're culturally not allowed to question, and there are many, many tiers of cultures going on in our world right now where you don't question, you don't buck the system.
Okay.
And it could be a religious system. It could be a political system. It could be a family structure. It could be a lot of things. But, if you're a rogue, very often you will be condemned. And he made sure that you were publicly condemned. And he would, nobody ever graduated in our Buddha field. No one ever became the Buddha except for him. You see, so he kept that dangling carrot. You're still not good enough. You're still not cooked, he used to say. You're still not there. And so that was the problem. That was the abuse, is that we were truly sincere seekers. We truly wanted that union but you don't get that kind of union the way he was offering it. But you didn't know that, right? So you never got to see the end of the road until you left and looked back in hindsight and went, hey, wait a minute, So you're in it. And now you're in a culture, you're in a family, you're in a community, and you've blocked off everything outside. So even though, like, I wanted to leave in 1995, I didn't leave till 2006.
Wow.
Why? I got disenchanted with him because I was one of those members of the Senate. I was sort of member of the Senate, but I was also, I like to relate to Michael Cohen. Because my father was a lawyer, I was very involved in the law, and I was also sort of one of the doctors of the community.
Okay.
So I was his legal advisor and his medical advisor or health advisor. So what do you think that does to you when you're the advisor of the most powerful guy in your world? It does a lot.
Oh, yeah.
It also makes you think that you're not being deceived, because after all, you're the one advising him.
Well, you're holding his not only his legal but his health. I mean, those are the two most important functions in his world. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, you've got him by the shirt and curlies.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So number one, you don't consider yourself stupid or gullible, and number two, he's giving you some power. You see. So he is basically feeding off my own narcissism. He's feeding off of my own ego, of which he compartmentalized. So he treated everybody differently. So how he treated me, he was never abusive to me, ever, not physically, but understand, and I always say this, my God, the man made a living out of being a hypnotherapist. I say this in the film. He had our psyche. We not only handed it to him every week, but we paid for it, you know? And so we handed him all of our darkest secrets and all of the skeletons in our closet and all of our fears and everything from childhood. So if we ever questioned him, he would go, Radhia, you are just projecting your father on me, and he could remember those details like crazy, right? And it was logical at the time. The whole idea was to transcend those pain of the past and your ego and all of that. So if he could massage that into your past traumas, he's got you.
Yeah.
And so that's what he did, and it was logical at the time. He also created this idea, which most groups do, of creating this notion of exceptionalism. This is happening in our country today. This is happening everywhere. Exceptional. People who believe that they're in the know and that nobody else really knows what's going on with the deep state. What's going on? Ooh, I'm in the know. I know these secrets, right? So that is a form of exceptionalism that becomes a trap, because when you think you're exceptional, then everything on the outside is the desert.
Yeah.
I don't want to leave, even though I wanted to leave for 11 years. I was conflicted, but where was I to go? Because no one knew what I knew. No one was as special as all of my friends and family. And I say family is my spiritual family, right? So, it's like, where would I go? It terrified me, the outside, because they train you that the other, them, the outside is something that is not you, and that you will not be accepted, nor will you relate to that, Yeah. So this tremendous divide that we're faced with today has become so frightening that it's, the divide in this country, the divide in the world, has become so tribal at this point that it's very, very difficult to want to open up. And again, I couldn't, even though I sort of got disenchanted with him, he became sort of like an eccentric uncle to me.
Okay.
What are you going to do? Throw him out?
Yeah.
He's still funny. He's still whatever. I still love him. Dumbest. I didn't know what was going on behind closed doors.
Right.
So on the surface, he's, it's my family, it's my crazy uncle, and I'll go along with it because that's just kind of the culture. So there you go.
So Radhia, I guess the question I have here is you go from worshiping and taking every word to, it's just my crazy uncle. And I really should take my 1 foot from out the door to 2 feet out the door and really separate myself from this tribal way of life. Draw a parallel here for me. Because we are in a tribal state of mind here with the world today. I mean, people can argue all day long if they want with me here, but we are in a tribal state of mind. I'll draw a perfect parallel for you, and people are going to hate that I'm going to draw this parallel. But let's use professional wrestling for a minute. You're either a WWE guy or an AEW guy. You're either a Coke or a Pepsi guy. Right. It seems like everything now is a choice. You got to choose one or the other.
Exactly.
So how do we stop being tribal and start softening those choices and just learn to relax and coexist with each other?
Well, if I knew that answer, I would be a millionaire today, probably. If I could solve that. I think that is one of the biggest hurdles that the human race is faced with. Mm-hmm. And honestly, as long as we have identities, we will never have peace on earth. As long as there's an us and a them, a you and a me, we will never have peace on earth. And we've come to a point, and especially right now in our political climate, we've gone beyond a let's agree to disagree. It's very, very difficult not to get emotionally aroused. And the problem, a lot of it has to do with the media. Never before has the human race had such an ability to communicate, and I use that term loosely, than we do today. Besides television, radio, we've got the internet. And so we've decided, and what seems to be very strange in this phenomenon, this cult phenomenon, is the media in a way has morphed into this sort of AI cult leader, because we all have our echo chambers. We all have that place we want to go because it's comfortable. And especially the internet figures out what your echo chamber is and feeds it to you. Yep. So it's very, very difficult today to really have a conversation with the other side, because much of it is misinformation and disinformation on both sides, on every side. Yeah. And so, when we were in the Buddha field, it was really before the internet became what it is today. So everything was slower. Communication was a lot slower. And you didn't have that instant gratification of getting a feedback loop from your echo chamber like we do today. Yeah. So it's difficult. I think I'm working on my next book, which is called Harder to Fall. And it's about addiction. Now, my book is going to be about addiction, about power, addiction of power and money. But there is an addiction that we have to the internet, to our echo chambers, too. And I'm a biochemical analyst, and I also study neurochemistry. And addiction is a very real thing. It's not just in your mind. It is a chemical addiction. And so addiction is one of the most difficult things I have seen people try and overcome, including members of my family, including, relationships, long-term relationships with drug addicts that I have had. It's a one day at a time, one step at a time. So we as a culture, we as a human race are faced with these phenomenons today that are very difficult to overcome. I wish I had good news for you. The only thing, when I wrote this book, and I want to emphasize this, that, people are going to read it and they're going to go to their corners,
Yep.
And they're going to say, oh, well, she just is being political. There's certain sections in my book that are using today's culture. No, that is not the point of this book. The point of this book is about the pathology of the follower. It is about the pathology of the leader and the follower, and how we all become followers. Like I said in the beginning of our conversation, at first it was duped until I, as a follower, had to take responsibility. Wait a minute. I created him. No leader becomes what they do and do some of the horrendous things that history has shown because of the leader, but it is the followers that enact the leader's business. So until we take responsibility, and all through the book, I seem like, I'm pointing the finger everywhere, but I'm also standing shoulder to shoulder with three fingers pointing back at me. I did this. I created him. I unwittingly participated in creating this monster. And I have to take responsibility for that. And that's why I changed the title to The Followers, and am showing it from the viewpoint of a follower, because I get it. And it has nothing to do with intelligence. It has nothing to do with education. It has nothing to do with anything but human, just our human frailties, And so, first of all, we have to see each other in their shoes. That's the first way. To be able to empathize. Because unfortunately, what I'm observing in this culture today is the follower starts to take on the pathology of the leader. If the leader starts to become extremely narcissistic and sociopathic, and you idolize or worship that leader, you start to take on those characteristics and reflect those yourself. So I was in a conversation recently with somebody who was asking me, do you think that narcissism or narcissistic sociopaths, et cetera, is nurture or nature? And I think it's both. And I think that it can start out. There are some people, Martha Stout, PhD, she wrote the Sociopath Next Door. She said that 1 out of 25 Americans are sociopathic.
That's a huge percentage.
Huge percentage.
Yeah.
So what are some of the qualities of a sociopath? The first, a narcissistic sociopath especially, and I define that rather succinctly in that second section of my book. I define a narcissist, a malignant narcissist, and a narcissistic sociopath, and how that develops, right? So there are those that are born with that mental condition. So that would be nature. And I God, I read an incredible article. This was a psychologist who was talking about people that are born sociopaths and what do they do with them. They noticed, like one story of a family who noticed that their 3-year-old daughter was sociopathic, that she was getting a thrill out of trying to kill her siblings, right?
Wow.
And so that is nature. That is when they're literally born where there's something definitely off. They get pleasure off of, pulling the legs off of, frogs, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So that is part of it. All right. But there is also this nature, nurture. There is people, I think, for example, like Jaime, the leader of my group, he was definitely, he was abused as a child. He was obviously sexually abused he lived on a ranch in Venezuela. The men on the ranch sexually abused him. I think it was pretty apparent that he was abused by the priests in church. Mm-hmm. So there's the nature aspect. When you grow up under trauma and you learn to compartmentalize your psyche in order to survive, then that skill just becomes developed. If you then find a group that will feed those skills, like we did, if you find followers that will feed that pathology, then it will grow and develop. So that is a combination of both nature and nurture. Some of it can be one, some of it can be the other, some of it can be a combination of the two. When you see that kind of behavior, the followers, it's really interesting. I was doing some research on Bukowski, who was writing the difference between European and Asian demagogues and American demagogues. And the demagogue leaders in European history, the populace was looking for a daddy figure. But in America today, we're not looking for a daddy figure. We're looking for a reflection of ourselves. So this is like the kitten who sees the lion in the mirror. So that feedback loop of having a leader projected out there of big, strong man, that's me, Yeah. So this is how that starts to play off, that inner relationship. It is a kind of a twist in the follower-leader dynamic, but it is an important one to start to see in ourselves. We all do it. If you think you're smarter or that you don't fall for that, you're wrong. Right. And I write in the third section. The third section is called Reflections. And I talk about the cult, the word cult. I define that. But I also then get into the 3 types of people that follow cults. Mm-hmm. Yep. And I get kind of humorous. Some of them are my favorite, more humorous chapters. I get pretty humorous. My sarcasm is the way I deal with things. But you've got your hummingbirds. Those are the people that just go along to get along. They're not really encumbered by the facts, but they're kind of looking for, they'll flitter around this little ideology or that little ideology, whether it's a religious or a political or a group or a club or whatever. Mm-hmm. But they're not totally into it, but they'll go along. And a lot of these are, they transform. The second are the soldiers on a mission. I would categorize myself as a soldier on a mission. Remember, I was looking for God realization from the time I was 14 years old. I had a mission to find that. And I refer in that chapter as the Navy SEALs of spirituality. I was willing to do whatever it took to find that God realization, to become the Buddha, mm-hmm. to suffer if I had to, right. to forfeit whatever. So I talk about the various different types of soldiers on a mission. From a political realm, your mission could be tax breaks or reduction of, power, wealth, reduction of restriction, from a government, right?
Yep.
So you're willing to sell your soul to get that, right? Whatever those missions are. So it can be as simple as that, or I talk about the family, which is a very, very frightening evangelical group that is on a mission. And they are willing to do whatever it takes from a political standpoint to turn the world into their ideology, their belief of the way the world should be and what Jesus, their version of Jesus, wants them to turn the world into. So they are on a mission, and they will do whatever it takes to make it. And they'll sell their soul to get what they want. So those are soldiers on a mission. Then you've got your kamikazes. Those are the people, the Jim Jones, the Charlie Mansons. They will die or kill for a belief. But remember, what is a kamikaze? That's a Japanese person, Japanese soldier or Air Force that was willing to commit suicide. Mm-hmm. These are suicide bombers. These are kamikazes that have an ideology that are so entrenched in that. Are they brainwashed? Are they imprisoned? No. They were raised that way. They were brought up to believe that the infidels, it is, I'm going to believe that there are 70 virgins in heaven waiting for me if I commit suicide for the cause. So they're not brainwashed, but they are indoctrinated into a belief from the time they are children. So that's what I'm talking about. It's a real broad perspective. And I really want to encourage people not to get caught up on the politics that I may be talking about, because it's not about that. It's about us. It's about indoctrination. It's about the followers. It's about wanting to belong. It's about all kinds of complexities of the human species, and we're, one thing I know you're
sure.
We got to go and you're going to say something, but there's a really good book called Sapiens. Mm-hmm. And it's a beautiful book. And the thing that I really enjoyed of where the writer was going is that the thing that differentiates the human being from animals is that we can fantasize, mm-hmm. that we have imagination. Yep. And that imagination can produce wonderful things, or that imagination can produce a hell.
True.
And if we have a hell in our mind of what the other is creating for us, then we'll do whatever it takes to destroy the other. And most of it's in our imagination. True. So it's a great book, The Sapiens.
Radhia has been gracious enough to give you this book for free, folks. All you got to do is review it. We've got the link for The Followers, Holy Hell and the Disciples of Narcissistic Leaders, How My Years in a Notorious Cult Parallel Today's Cultural Mania. It's available in the description of this program. You just click on the link, go get this book for free on Kindle, and review it. That's all you got to do. And it is. What's that? And
I do want to say this. Mm-hmm. If you're not a reader, it's on Audibles. If you don't have Audibles, the Audible is free for the first one. And if you do have Audibles, then listen to it if you don't like to read. I don't, So, or if you drive a lot, mm-hmm. It's in my voice. So who knows the sarcasm better than me? And so you can also enjoy it on Audibles. And it's at Barnes & Noble, and it's on Amazon and Kindle and all the likely places anyway. If you miss the window where it's free.
There you go. So either Audible or on Kindle, either way, get it for free, review it. That's what Roddy is looking for. She's looking for your review, and she's going to make it available for free for you to do so. So that's it. That's the easiest free book you'll ever get in your life.
Yay! Yeah, exactly. And you can also you can follow me on all of Facebook, and I'm just starting to get that going. But I do have a website, and we're going to put this review, we're going to put this little conversation on my website. I want to spell my name for you guys because everybody throws the H around. I don't know why. It's Radhia H-I-A, the H is after the D, Gleis, Gleis.com. RadhiaGleis.com is my website. And I got articles, and I've got all of my interviews with a lot of interesting people, such as the one I'm having now. Mm-hmm. And I'll put that up probably as soon as you give me the link.
And we'll have the link to your website as well in the description of the show, so you can visit the website as well. So get the book in the description of the show. Get the website. Go to the website in the description of the show. Everything will be in the description of this show, so you can follow Radhia on her website. You can also get a copy of the book in this website. Remember, review the book. And get the book, and by all means read it. It's a fascinating read. It's an entertaining read. And it goes quickly. It does go quickly. It's a very entertaining read. You'll pick it up. You'll not want to put it down.
Awesome.
I got through it in 2.5 days.
I'm so glad to hear that. Some people, I'm a slow reader. That's why I like to listen to audibles. But I explain why I'm a slow reader in that first chapter. So, you'll understand that. I'm part of what led me to the group. I'm
a slow reader too, but that's because I'm thorough. I want to absorb what I'm reading.
Good. Well, I try to make it as entertaining and as humorous and as poignant, and it's chock full of it's got about 284 citations. It's chock full of research, but it's not dry at all.
No.
I don't want to make it dry for you at all. So I metabolized all that research and then put it out in a more entertaining way. So I hope you like it. And see the film too. The film's on Amazon, and it's fun only because if you see the film, you'll see live footage of us. So when you're reading, you'll have a better image of what I'm talking about. I'm pretty descriptive in the book, but you'll be able to see me actually when I'm 29. I don't know if you'll recognize me, but it's a beautiful film as well.
And Holy Hell is on did you say Amazon?
It's Amazon Prime, yeah.
Amazon
video.
Prime. Okay, so you can see Holy Hell on Amazon Prime. Again, the followers is on the link in the description of this program, and you can check out Radhia's website on the description of this program as well. Radhia Gleis, thank you very much for being on this episode of True Crime Tuesday.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Right, folks, happy to be here.
Thank you so much for being with us. All right, it's a time where if you're listening to the free version of the show, we must bid you adieu. But if you don't want to leave us right now, you don't necessarily have to. What you can do is you can go to Stitcher.com, click on the subscribe button under Stitcher Premium. That will get you to listen to Dumb Crime, Stupid Criminals. That'll get you to listen to the ad-free version of Darkness Radio. And that'll get you to listen to hundreds of podcasts ad-free and expand your audio horizons more than you could possibly ever imagine. And the best thing is you can do it for just $5 a month. Do it right now. Go to Stitcher.com, click on that premium button, subscribe to Stitcher Premium for just $5 a month. You'll get Dumb Crime, Stupid Criminals as far as True Crime Tuesday. You'll get an ad-free Darkness Radio. And of course, you'll get hundreds of podcasts ad-free and expand those audio horizons. Go ahead and do it today.